My name is Sven Lieber from Ghent University ID Lab in Belgium. This talk is about one specific use case of linked data, which is federating advertisement targeting. It is exactly what you think it is. It's about advertisement. The web is full of advertisement, but usually the same ad is not shown to all the users. Ads are usually targeted to specific users to be more relevant. A few years ago, on Facebook, I got for some reason always advertisements about wooden watches. And I can tell you one thing. It seems to work. So, for this talk, let me give you a small example about online advertising. Then I will talk about EcoDaLo, which is the ecosystem for data management of local publishers, in which we did research on how to use federated querying on decentralized knowledge graphs of local publishers to empower them to compete with the global players in online advertisement. And then we look into how the approach of our solution compares to other existing approaches. And at the end, some very important considerations towards privacy and ethics. The main message of this talk is that our solution still relies on an identification mechanism to target users. However, because of these decentralized knowledge graphs of the different publishers, we improve online advertisement by avoiding sharing possibly private data between the different publishers. Let's have a look into one example. Imagine that we want to promote the semantics conference, and we want to target semantic web researchers between 80 and 60. And we specify where next to the contents our ad should be placed. Well, we take this information and we go to the publishers, and within the first phase, the campaign setup, we provide this information, with the aim that in a second phase, every time a user visits a website of the publisher, gets the targeted ad served. How does it work? Let's look into a concrete example. Let's imagine a user visits a website with a mobile device. Of course, the ads shown have to come from somewhere, from an ad server. Now, for the targeting aspect, imagine that there's publisher A, which knows that this user is between 18 and 25. Well, how does the publisher know that, you may ask? Well, usually publishers make it from certain observations. Let's imagine in this case that the user is a registered user and the website of publisher A, and consented that his age range information is used for advertisement with third parties. Let's further assume that there is a second publisher, publisher B. Publisher B knows the visitor trait that the visitor here is a linked data expert. Again, from some observations. Maybe the user checked more than 10 times blog posts about linked data on the publisher's website. Now we run into a problem. Neither of the publishers have enough information to target this user. A combination is needed. How do we do it? Well, if we just combine the data within a data integration approach, we run into certain problems here. First of all, a lot of private data are shared, which is also not in the interest of the publishers because they give up some competitive advantage. So that's where EcoDaLo comes in. After showing this example, let's have a look what EcoDaLo is. EcoDaLo was research conducted in Flanders in Belgium, where it was also applied. Besides the academic partners, there were also 3 companies involved. The companies AdLogic, Pebble Media, and the Rularta Media Group. And to know what the partners think about the project, just have a look at this video they made. So, but back to the content. How do we solve this issue about the combination of data? Well, what we did basically is turn around the arrows. We do federated querying instead. Therefore, querying the different databases of the publishers. This gives us certain advantages. We don't look into these super private information about how many blog posts you may have visited, because these are the observations. We only take the aggregated visitor traits into account. Also, data is not shared between the publishers, only the third component, the federated querying layer, combines this information. That also ensures that the publishers are the exclusive owners still of their traits and how they were observed. So how does this actually work? Well, we have this identification mechanism as well in this federating querying layer. And now, in order to do the querying, we use a common trait model. For this purpose here, we used a SCOS taxonomy from the IAB Tech Lab nonprofit organization, where they define this taxonomy. But since we are using RDF, any common trait model can be used. Now, each publisher has to provide mappings from their visitor traits to this common trait model. And in EcoDaLo, we used the RDF mapping language RML. And this gives us some advantages. Like different ambiguities can be resolved, like that the age range 18 and 25 is actually within the age range 18 and 60. Or we can also specify in the mappings how a linked data expert relates to a semantic web expert, which is actually the one which we want to target. So after showing you how EcoDaLo actually works, let's have a look how the approach of it compares with other approaches. We look into the case where there's a single local publisher, then a global publisher, how then the approach where all the data is just integrated, and our trait federation approach. With respect to trait quality, local publishers usually have higher quality traits due to a more strong relationship with the customer, which you don't have for the global publisher. Of course, this is retained for both the integration and the trait federation. Regarding scale, like for local publisher, it does not scale. For global, of course, it scales, and for data integration and trait federation, both in terms of visitors and visitor traits, it will scale. For the exclusiveness, well, if you have a local publisher, everything is exclusive and private. You give that up both at the global publisher and for data integration. However, for trait federation, since we only look into the aggregated traits and not into the observations, how it was made, privacy is preserved to a certain extent, and data stays exclusive at each publisher. For the ease of setup, of course, for local publishers, there's not much to do. For global publishers, you will just use their service. We know how it works for data integration. That might be a cumbersome process. However, for our solution here, if we have this common trait model, the publishers only have to provide the mappings. And in terms of interoperability for the closed systems environments of local and global publishers is not good. Data integration has a better interoperability. However, there are also still certain efforts, whereas the efforts are kept low in our approach, because also we are using RDF. And it also is a very positive effect towards maintainability, as we only have these common trait model and the mappings, which are like the changing parts of the system. Well, privacy and ethics. We deal a lot with personal data in this advertisement example. Well, we have the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which requires compliant consent, meaning that the visitor is aware which personal data is used for which purpose, which third parties are involved, and the user explicitly has to opt in by giving the consent. So in our example, that means that the user needs to be aware which publishers are part of the federation and also which aggregated visitor traits are used within this for this trait federation. But towards ethic, actually we have to assume good faith of the publishers that the data is not used for discrimination or other purposes besides the stated purposes the user gave consent to. There are more ethical guidelines in literature which need to be considered in a bigger process which goes beyond our technical solution. So, after looking into an online advertising example and introducing our solution with decentralized knowledge graphs and looking into how that compares to other approaches, we also looked into important consideration towards privacy and ethics, which, however, let us look into the future because in our lab we work with decentralized knowledge graphs management, So we have to look into more research on describing and using constraints within this federating query layer. Alright, stay safe.